Hi BookTube, it's Amy. So the weather has turned and we are in the thick of early fall here. Beautiful rainy Sunday. I just came back from an hour-long walk, made myself a pot of tea here. Nothing fancy going on, just orange pekoe. But I thought I would do a recent reads since I missed my Friday reads this past week. And I had a week off work, was visiting my parents within the province here. And so I had a lot of time to read. And I went to my parents' place with a couple of mystery novels, intending to read some light things this week. But then we popped into this little bookshop in Kitchener-Waterloo called Old Goat Books. And this is a very tiny bookshop, but it's an old yellow brick house, and the prices are mid-range, I'd say, for a bookshop. You're not going to get anything for $5 there, but the prices aren't outrageous either. And I'm going to say shocked. I wasn't expecting to find this that day, but I was shocked to find Nicholas Basbane's Patience and Fortitude on the shelf there for, I think I paid, what, $26 for it, and that's actually a good price considering what I've seen online to get the hardback shipped to Canada. And so I had the pleasure of reading Patience and Fortitude over the last couple of days, and I actually finished it early yesterday morning. Now, Nicholas Basbanes has written a couple of great big books like this on the love of books. I read A Gentle Madness earlier this year. I had read bits and pieces of it before, but A Gentle Madness is all about the madness of book collectors, and this one is along a similar vein, and he spends the first hunk of the book talking about various ancient libraries and historical libraries in Europe. The focus of this book is the history of Western libraries and Western book collecting. And so he talks about some notable libraries and then transitions into talking about notable book collectors and then some more modern libraries within the United States. And I was actually quite surprised that he took a little bit of a foray into Canada this time. So I put myself a sticky note in the book where he talks about Canada. And I had a good laugh at this one story here. There was a book dealer in Montreal in the 1960s, I think it was, and he learned that a prominent religious institution was sending a number of its books to the dump, and they had already sent about half of them to the dump. And so this book dealer goes to the religious institution and says, I will give you $1,000 for the rest of your books that you're planning to send to the dump. And they said, okay, sounds like a great deal. And he takes these books, goes through them, gets about 6 boxes worth of books that he can actually sell for something. So books of worth. One of them being a copy of the first book ever printed in the city of Montreal that he then went and sold for $2,500. But this is not the end of this story. So he's got these 6 boxes of books and he's made a bunch of money off them. He knows they're worth something. And somebody else from this religious institution gets in touch and says, I don't think you gave us enough for these books. And so he says, you know what, here's the deal. I'll give you most of these books back except for the few I've got over here, and you can keep the $1,000. And they said, okay, that sounds like a great deal. Now, it was good for the dealer as well, because the books he gave back were the ones that he didn't think he could sell because they weren't worth anything. So not only did he get several $1,000s worth of books for a cheap price, but he also got rid of the stock he couldn't sell. So I thought that was quite a funny story to come across. And then there's another story in here about a prominent collector who had never bid on his own books before. He always had an agent go and bid for him. Now, something came up to auction and He desperately wanted it. It was something he had wanted for years, but his dealer was out of town. And so he got in touch with the auction house himself and put in a bid, basically a bid for whatever it went for. He said, go as high as you need to. Because he'd been unable to get in touch with his dealer, and he ended up getting it for a slightly higher price than he expected, but he was happy until he realized that the underbidder was his own dealer who had rushed back into town and went to bid on this item for his client, for him, not being able to get in touch with him either. And so he was both the winning bidder and the underbidder, which of course cranked that price up high, and he could have gotten it for a lot less. And from what I understand, that's a bit of an infamous story. But overall, I greatly enjoyed this. Almost as good as A Gentle Madness, but not quite as good. I was more interested in some of the stories that came up in A Gentle Madness, but as the subtitle says here, it's a roving chronicle of book people, book places, and book culture. And it does have a very American focus. So as with A Gentle Madness, there were some parts talking about American libraries and American collections that I wasn't all that interested in. Not that American collectors and American libraries aren't interesting, but sometimes when you get into the nitty-gritty of certain universities, my eyes do start to glaze over a bit. So that was an excellent book to come across. Now, at that same bookstore at Old Goat Books, I also came across this curiosity that I've read just a little bit of. And it was actually right when I walked in the door of the yellow brick house. To the right, there is a shelf of some of the older books. And so this is something called Canadian Houses of Romance by Catherine Hale with drawings by Dorothy Stevens. And I had never heard of this one. It's in a little bit of rough shape, but I think I paid, $12 for it? Let me just open up the front and check. Yeah, $12.50. I paid $12.50. But it caught my eye because I am interested in old travel books. And I notice, just in browsing here and there, that it seems to have been popular for a time to write about cities and houses. Perhaps not necessarily for people who are traveling there themselves, but for the armchair traveler. And so it's from 1926, and it has some nice illustrations throughout, nice frontispiece here of the Chateau Papignon at Montbello. 1926, Macmillan Company. And there's this weird little punch through the page that says presentation copy. I'll take that with a grain of salt, but it is produced and printed in Canada, and it's just sort of, I guess, portraits, if you will, of various interesting houses and buildings throughout Canada. And so I read the first bit here, The Angelic Patronage, which is about a house that had links to the church, and then there is the house that was not there, where the author talks about looking for a house and finding it's gone. And now I'm on to the fur trader's house. So maybe I'll talk about this one a little bit more in my Friday Reads next week, once I've read some more of it. But so far it's quite an interesting book, and I'm always interested in something like that, especially when the focus is Canada. Then yesterday I began to reread The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco. Nicholas Basbane actually talked a bit about The Name of the Rose and Umberto Eco and the presence of books within The Name of the Rose. And so that inspired me to pull this off the shelf at my parents' house and begin to reread yesterday. And I'm just about 150 pages in. So we have, if you know the story, we have a couple of murders so far, and the very entertaining argument, or debate rather, about did Jesus laugh? Is it correct to laugh? and discussion about that lost Aristotle work on comedy. And then I did dip into as well, this is one I picked up from the KW bookstore, which was open as well when I was back in Kitchener. And I thought I'd make the round of the shops just to support some of those used bookstores there. But this one is from the KW bookstore, and it's Rousseau, The Reveries of the Solitary Walker. So it's just a little penguin volume here. A series of walks written a few years before his death. And he's just contemplating and thinking on several things about his life, about his writings, about what he's achieved. And I've read the first walk, and I'm just a couple pages into the second walk. So far, nothing of note really worth sharing, but it is sort of a calming little bit to read just before bed. And so I've got that on the go as well. And it's just out of reach here, but I did read a little bit more of the journals of Dorothy Wordsworth this morning. That, of course, is the sister of Romantic poet William Wordsworth. And I didn't take that with me when I went to see my parents just because of the weight of it. And I did know that I would be weighing down my suitcase quite heavily with books on the way back. I usually only travel anywhere I go really with a suitcase half full. They weighed my suitcase in Ottawa on the way out, and it was 24.6 pounds. And oddly enough, just because I guess of the way things are at the moment, with, screening questions and making sure everyone has their mask on and keeping people 6 feet apart in the stations, nobody weighed my baggage on the way back yesterday. But I would guess it was probably about 10 pounds heavier, somewhere around 35 pounds. Light enough that I could hoist it up the steps of the train without any difficulty or assistance, but it was a little bit on the heavier side, and I'm quite pleased because I brought back the books that I purchased, but I've been slowly weeding off the shelf that I left at my parents' place when I moved out. Perhaps not the smartest move. When I moved out 4 years ago, I left about half of my book collection behind just because I was moving into a single bedroom with other students to do my master's, and I've never had the opportunity to bring them back in bulk, and so every time I go I slip a few more into my suitcase, and I'm down to just about 2 layers of a shelf with books there. I've also weeded the collection and sold them for store credit, and every time I go, I weed some books from the collection, take them to the KW bookstore, and my mom and I load up on some more books. But I was quite pleased because I did manage to fit in all, 2, 4, 6, 8, all 8 volumes of my Enid Blyton's The Adventure series that I loved as a kid. Also, a couple of my New York Review books, and a small collection of Louis L'Amour novels, as well as my copy of Captain Hook, which was also a childhood favorite. So I am quickly filling up the empty shelf I had over there. So that is roughly what I've been up to reading. It is a very rainy, chilly Sunday. I am enjoying my tea in this cornflower blue mug. There's a saucer as well. Just something from Chapters and Indigo that I picked up with a gift card I got for my birthday last month. I've got my teapot out for the first time this year. I don't tend to use the teapot much in the summer just because I'm drinking a lot less tea, and more often than not too, I want a great big mug, but when you're going for a tiny cup like this, you really do need a teapot. So do let me know if you've read any of the books I mentioned here, and I'll see you again soon with another video.